Dr. Justin Marchegiani, welcome to the podcast. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, many people might not know this, but I started following you and I think it was 2015 or 2016. And without knowing
Right.
it, you have been a huge influence on my business and how I help my clients. As I mentioned, I'm originally from Ireland, so I'd never heard of you, but somewhere when I immigrated, God intervened and I came across your work and Evans. And I had
Great.
listened to so much of your content. It's almost awe. I'm in awe right now that
That's so funny.
you're
That's
actually
great.
on my podcast now. We're actually meeting. So thank you for everything you do. Like, I mean it.
Well, thank you, and thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. I mean, it means a lot. You want to think that you're helping lots of people, and you kind of hope you like you cast little hooks out there, and maybe you can help people. And so, thanks for sharing that. That's the case. That's great. Thank you.
And sometimes, we think we're not helping people. We
Hmm.
can be so self-critical and we see all these other practitioners and influencers and they've got
Hmm.
millions of followers. And
Hmm.
we almost, I was saying to someone earlier, like sometimes I try to avoid all that, but we're our own worst critic and I'll compare myself and I'm like, oh my God, I'm no good. I'm a failure. I'm not as good as
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
influencers with a million followers. And then one person will just message you and they'll say, you've changed my life. And then we almost get brought back down to earth and you're like, I'm making a
Yes.
difference and it is worth it.
Bingo. 100%. Thanks for sharing that.
So let's jump into the topics. For
Sure.
people who are not aware of your work, you are deep in the whole functional
Hmm.
medicine field,
Yes.
like really deep. And you've also got a doctorate in chiropractic as well. So you have
Yep.
a lot of
Yep.
experience.
Yes, I think so. And I got a book coming out, by the way, in June called The
Wow.
Thyroid Reboot. If you go to thyroidreboot.com, it redirects to the Amazon page, but take a look at it. It's been a long time coming where we talk about thyroid issues, but obviously we connect everything to it because you don't just have a thyroid issue in isolation. Usually there's some gut issues going on, there's nutrient absorption stuff, there's hormone issues, female hormone issues, adrenal dysfunction, maybe toxicity, maybe mold. And so it really kind of connects the dots with everything together in one book. So,
That's awesome. And it really is all the things. Like it's
yes.
not just one thing. And every time I have got stuck on thyroid over the years, I've gone back and said, Dr. Justin will know the answer to this. I'll go back to.
Yeah, yeah. When you've been doing it as long as I have, patience are your best teacher. I
Yeah.
agree.
So, well, I wanted to start off firstly with adrenal fatigue first.
Yeah.
A lot
Hmm.
of practitioners will argue that it's not even a thing. I still use the term because I think
Hmm.
people still relate to it. People
Hmm.
have heard it, they'll say, oh, yeah, I've experienced that. So, give us your input on adrenal fatigue. What do you think is going on here? What is it?
Yeah.
How does it begin? And so on.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, first off, I have a whole chapter in my new book coming out, Thyroid Reboot, on the adrenals. And we kind of connect it to the thyroid, connect it to the female hormone cascade. So we talk all about it. And a lot of people who have adrenal, I prefer the word dysfunction because people could have adrenals that are hyperactive or they could be underactive or could be more of a rhythm issue. And so usually, the better term for fatigue is when someone's kind of more very low, but then people confuse that with Addison's disease, where it's like, which is more of an autoimmune issue where the gland has been beaten up. And so most people, the terminology gets thrown around. They go to their conventional MD and then they confuse adrenal fatigue with Addison's, and they say, "Well, that's not that. Let's do an ACTH stim test. Let's do an antibody test." No, you're not Addison's, and so they kind of poo-poo that and kind of wipe the slate clean. And then also, what if you have adrenal issues, but it's not overtly low from a functional standpoint? What if it's high in the morning, low in the, let's say it's high or low at the wrong time, or it's overly high or overly low, then what, right? And so I prefer that term dysfunction because it's kind of a bigger umbrella. But in regards to it's huge because the adrenals play major roles with blood sugar. And so if we have lots of dysglycemia throughout the day, then that's going to stress out the adrenals. It's going to play a major role with stress handling and inflammation. And so it's going to decrease our capacity to deal with stress. Or if we're chronically stressed or inflamed, that's going to deplete the adrenals. And then also the adrenals, the end part of the adrenals produce catecholamines and they also produce sex hormones. So the more depleted our adrenals become, the inability to deal with acute stressors goes down and the ability to use our adrenals to produce sex hormones also drops. And this is very important for women because women only have so many follicles in their ovaries. They're born with all the follicles they ever have, which is kind of crazy. And so once you hit a certain age where that follicular reserve is empty, it's like the power goes out and your backup generator isn't charged. Now, what do you do? Right. And so think of the adrenals, and that DHEA is a really important building block for the backup generator turning on to help those sex hormones. So it's instrumentally important to women, especially as they get more perimenopausal.
Hmm. Where does you mentioned ACTH? A
Yeah.
lot of women I work with super stressed. So I'm in Alberta, Calgary. It's a
Yeah.
very highly driven province, lots of oil and gas,
Yeah.
pressure going on, a lot of real estate, and the women that I'm working with, and even some of the men, they're just wired, go, 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 go. They barely get a minute to stop.
Hmm.
And I'm saying to them, like, how long are you going to keep this up for? Eventually, you are going to crash and burn. You cannot keep going on with this. But ACTH is a sex hormone that's involved in this process that a lot of people have not heard about. A lot of people have heard of, okay, adrenaline, cortisol, maybe the influence there on the sex hormones. But can you talk about ACTH, how it influences us when we are stressed, how it influences then something a lot of my clients experience when they're stressed, and that would be fluid retention, and where does calcium come in? I know I'm kind of hitting you with everything there.
Yep. Yeah. So a couple of things out of the gate. So first off, in today's workplace, obviously there's a lot more women than there were 20 or 30 years ago, right? Which is a good thing. But at the same standpoint, hormones impact men and women differently. And so, okay, are we equal? Sure, but hormonally we're different. And then what does that mean? Because hormones affect how we deal with stress, it affects how we deal with emotions. And if you understand that, then you can understand why you shouldn't be holding yourself right next to your male counterpart, right? If you read Dr. Jonathan Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, what he talks about is the high level of testosterone that men have. When they have a whole bunch of cortisol dumped on them, that testosterone helps buffer the cortisol and helps their brain work better through stress. And because there's a 10x difference on average between women and testosterone than men, meaning men have 10 times more than women, when that cortisol hits that brain, that testosterone isn't as high and doesn't quite have that same neutralizing effect. And so sometimes stress can impact women a little bit harder at the brain level than men. And so it's very important to that we have healthier adrenals, healthier habits, healthier nutrients on board to help with the brain stress, healthier sleep, because these hormone differences are there. How stress impacts a male versus a female will be different. And so it just means you need other habits and other things going for you to help be able to adapt to that stress, because stress is all about adaptation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And women
Yeah.
are
And
just
so
not as
we're all
resilient.
going to have stress. So it's just about let's make sure the adrenals, let's make sure everything else is there, is balanced, so we can adapt to someone who has more testosterone. Now the problem is we talked about a pre-show. Women can also have high amounts of testosterone too, but it's usually not in a good way. So with things like PCOS, ovarian cyst syndrome, polycystic ovarian cyst syndrome, that's going to essentially be where we have high levels of insulin due to usually too much insulin. And so too much insulin is going to cause more testosterone. So too much carbohydrate, too much insulin, that upregulates an enzyme that causes more testosterone to happen, right? We think, well, that helps men, right? But it's not good for women because it's the number one cause of infertility, number one. It's going to increase prolactin, which screws up the brain feedback loop to the ovaries, which then causes cycle perturbations. And then number three, it can also create abnormal hair growth, lots of acne, lots of oil production. And so we want to make sure we maximize testosterone via healthy adrenal function, but we don't want it so high like we see in PCOS, which drives infertility, skin issues, cycle issues, and then obviously abnormal hair growth too. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then, and prolactin is another one of our stress hormones, really,
Mhm.
and a great measurement for stress, I believe. But
Mhm.
back to the ACTH, so that then when we're
So
experiencing,
so I want to highlight that prolactin, right? So you talked about that just briefly.
Mhm.
So we talked about adrenal, right? So the outer part of the so how you kind of remember it in school. I always use a lot of acronyms, right? So how I learned it was sugar, salt, sex. The deeper in you go, the better it gets. That's how you remember it. So the outer part of the adrenals deals with salt and electrolyte regulation. All right, that's the glomerulus fascicularis. Then we have the second level, and that's what it's sugar, salt. I'm sorry, salt, sugar. The second one goes with cortisol and blood sugar regulation. And then sex is the inner part. That's going to be DHEA. And then the fourth S, which I didn't really say because it doesn't sound as cool, that's going to be the stress hormone. So salt, sugar, sex, stress. So we have the sugar or the sex hormones being the DHEA, and the innermost is the medulla. That's the adrenaline. And when we overstimulate the adrenals, especially that adrenaline part, that converts the dopamine in our brain. It pulls it downstream to that adrenaline, which is that middle part of the adrenals. And dopamine is a tonic inhibitor for prolactin. So it's the brake. So when we start depleting our dopamine, when dopamine goes down, our foot comes off the brake pedal. So dopamine's dropping, foot comes off the brake pedal, and now prolactin goes up. And then prolactin starts to screw up the cycle too. So this is how, oh, it's just you're stressed. Yeah, but what does stress mean? What's it doing to your hormones? Let's look at it mechanistically. So then if we understand it, then we can wrap our head around, oh, if I do this, it does that. If people can understand what they're doing and why it's helping, you get better compliance. But if you just kind of use very vague language, they don't understand why it's helping. And so I try to get really in the mechanisms of what's happening so people get it.
Yeah. And it's not, stress is not just a woo-woo emotional
Hmm.
feeling. It
Hmm.
has a biochemical impact on the whole
Bingo.
system. And
Correct.
it's interesting that you mentioned dopamine because dopamine very much correlates to joy. And something a
Yes.
lot of people I feel are not embracing as much anymore because we're so go, 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 and people are losing out on sleep and I know marriage problems, financial issues. Of course, we've got political and environmental worry,
Hmm.
all of that. And people, to put it in layman's terms, they're not experiencing as much joy. And to me and you, that would feed back to, well, why? Where is this dopamine coming in? What's influencing this? But it would make sense that when we look at stress as the bigger picture, dopamine is impairing our ability to have joy or fun. Like a lot
Correct.
of people don't have fun, they don't laugh anymore.
Hmm. Hmm. It's very important. Yeah. And then just obviously being on our screens and tablets can be a big thing. Looking into social media to get constant validation is a big thing too. All these things are important. That's why it's better to look within, do things that you enjoy, get out in nature, get some good sunlight on your skin, get your diet dialed in, get good sleep, really prioritize the things that you love to do. That's important.
Yeah. But again,
Hmm.
most people are not because they're just go, go, go,
Hmm.
9 to 5 and
Yeah.
then kids, sports and everything. I heard you
Oh, yeah,
say,
absolutely.
I heard you say recently that up to 50% of the population has some degree of adrenal fatigue.
Hmm.
How true do you think that is now? And what are the different degrees or stages of adrenal fatigue?
Well, I mean, what happens is most people, when they have a symptom, they tend to reach for a medication to neutralize it. So if I can't focus, I'm going to go on Ritalin or Adderall, or maybe I'm just going to pump in more coffee and do more stimulants. So a lot of people, their solution for the horse not working great is let's whip the horse harder with the whip, right? But we know that that's not sustainable. So I always talk to patients about constructive vehicles and destructive vehicles, right? Destructive vehicles are the horse and the whip, right? Can you get some output from it? Yeah, you can. Is it long lasting? Is it supporting healing and healthy anabolic metabolism, meaning building back up? No, it's not. And so I always tell patients we have to look at what our long-term goal is and we have to choose constructive vehicles that build the body back up. And so we always go towards better sleep, better food quality, because the food is the building blocks. People talk about calories, but calories when you start reducing food down to a calorie, you can justify any crappy food in your diet because all foods are just calories, right? And calories is just a measure of heat. You have a bomb calorimeter, you put some food in it. How many calories basically equals how much it can heat that 1 gram of Celsius water around it, right? That's it. But the problem is food has nutrients in it. And so when you reduce food to calories, you stop looking at the nutrients in the food. It's a sleight of hand by big food. If we just stop looking at the nutrition, let's look at this thing over here. It's like, no, no, no. Broom that. Let's look at the nutrient density. Let's look at the hormone building blocks. Let's look at the amino acid building blocks. This is what we need to build healthy hormones. So let's look at the building blocks here. And then we can dial in the macronutrients, which are important too, because if we do too much carbohydrate, too much sugar, that can create this PCOS situation or this insulin resistant situation. Or the more subtle way to look at it is just dysglycemia, right? The more our blood sugar bounces around throughout the day, that's going to create more hormonal issues. And so I tell patients out of the gate, just get a blood sugar meter. Just start taking it before you eat a meal. Get it below 100. Ideally, within 1 hour, I want it back below 120. In hour two, back below 100. Definitely in hour three. So just start with this. This is going to start picking up issues before you have any problems. Your conventional medical doctors, and it's going to take a decade to come up. And some patients don't follow in that insulin resistance pattern where it's up high and staying high. They may just bounce around. They may go overly high and then go overly low. That's called reactive hypoglycemia, and that can create problems in jitteriness and heart palpitations and anxiety and sleeplessness too. It can create a lot of the mood issues people don't like. And so it's good to have a good blood sugar meter. I like the Keto Mojo. Um, Talked about it for years. They should give me a sponsorship, seriously, because of the fact it connects to your phone, and then you get a Bluetooth graph, and so you can kind of see how it goes, which is nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, and a
Yep.
big part of that reactive insulin is adrenaline. So, what we're saying
Yeah.
here
When
is,
it drops, you get the adrenaline picking it back up. Yes.
yeah, but usually, like you mentioned, the jitters, those kind of symptoms are
Hmm.
what ensue when we see a direct influence with adrenaline. So, what you're saying here is with this adrenal fatigue or dysfunction that we're seeing
Yep.
in a lot of people, that we would be naive to not consider a big aspect of that is going to be your nutrition and your blood sugars.
Yes, and I'm just searching right here because one of the big things you see also with this blood sugar fluctuation is you're going to see a dumping of electrolytes too. So
Mhm.
when you're stressed and inflamed, where you have lots of cortisol or higher blood glucose levels, you are going to dump your electrolytes, especially your magnesium, and then that plays a big role in your nervous system, calming your heart, calming your nervous system, calming that sympathetic tone. And so the electrolytes also can be a big problem. So that's why one of the foundational things when I work with patients is we're getting the food right, we're getting the ability to break down that food, with chewing, timing our hydration, getting our enzymes and acids dialed in, but also dialing in our electrolytes. That plays a big role with our heart, and our cells use what's called the sodium potassium pump to function. If you look at cell physiology, the sodium potassium pump is essential. And if you take most people and you just run a sample day through Chronometer, cronometer.com, which it's like a MyFitnessPal, but it tells you micronutrients. That's why I like it. You'll find that most people do not hit the 45 to 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day, and most don't hit the magnesium threshold either. And
Mhm.
so, well, the first thing we need to be well, our cells have to be well first. And how we make sure our cells are well is we make sure the hydration's dialed in and our electrolytes are dialed in.
Mhm. And our electrolytes, I've repeated this many times, they really are one of the primary fuel sources for our adrenals. It's like putting gas in the tank. That's
Yes,
what our adrenals need. I wasn't going
bingo.
to bring this up, but it just popped into my head as you were speaking. What do you think about something that we, or I at least, see a lot in my practice? Women that are very, very stressed. They're very wired during the day. When they go to bed, they will have nocturnal urination. They're peeing six,
Yeah.
7, 8, 9 times a night. How
Yes.
relevant are the electrolytes there for that stress response? And that is a stress response.
Yeah, I mean, so when your electrolytes are low, it's common that you tend to your body wants to overly hydrate to try to get more electrolytes back in. But if you're not supplementing electrolytes in that water or it's not a mineral rich water, then you may overhydrate. So the first thing is make sure you are hydrating enough. But two, that's where supplemental electrolytes are dialed in. So that will get you more of that in, that will kind of quench the thirst, help the electrolytes regulate. And then the second thing is stress. If my female patients are in an environment that is incredibly stressful, it's okay. We have two options. We can decrease the stress, work less, but if we can't do that, then it's like I need you to have more of these habits locked in over here if you're going to put yourself through this stress. And then a lot of times what happens, I see women comparing, but my other coworkers don't have to do that. And it's like, let's focus on you. I want to make
Mhm.
sure. So comparison's the thief of joy. I see it a lot with patients. And especially I see it with women who are in a stress situation in a male dominated field. I'm just like, let's work with your hormones, let's work with your physiology. And if we have this stress over here and we can't negotiate that, let's work on the habits over here to get it so you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Let's not burn the candle at both ends. So we gotta, like you mentioned, we'll get the electrolyte dialed, then we may ratchet up an extra hour of sleep. We may also make sure the exercise is not problematic. I see it very commonly in women. We have to make sure that you feel better after your workout than when you started. Have to make sure emotionally you can repeat it. You're not walking away from that workout where you just got beaten up, or that next day you're not overly tired, overly sore. I mean, if you're throwing in a new movement for the first time, okay, fine. But outside of that, you shouldn't feel overly beaten up. So I just try to make sure we lock and load, make sure all the health habits are locked in and they meet what the stress demand is during the day.
Mhm.
That's really important.
So, what would you say to a woman who is, again, highly stressed, go, go, go all day? Her sleep is interrupted. She is not hydrating at all. Lucky to get 1 to 2 cups of fluid in a day, not prioritizing sleep. I mean, a lot of what you just said there is
Yeah.
we got to lock in all this stuff. But if she was your client or case study,
Yeah.
what would you say to her? If it was me, I'd say, how long are you going to keep this up for? It's only a matter of time before you crash.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I'm leaning on the pain points. Why are you coming to see me? Why are you calling me right now? Why are you reaching out? There's some level of pain right now in your life that is causing you to say, "Uncle, I need help."
Mhm.
And then I tell patients, what is pain? What is pain? Pain is pay attention inside now. You're starting to see the symptoms that are happening are stealing my productivity, my quality, my joy. And so if you want to fix that, we need a behavioral change. And so you're here right now because that pain is so high because you want a different outcome over here. And so I try to get really just real with it because that
Mhm.
helps me to leverage behavioral change.
Yeah.
Because, the definition of insanity is wanting a different result with no change. And so
Mhm.
I just try to really get real with it so we can understand why we're doing it, what our pain points are, and why. Like, what are the pain points? Is it the fact that you want to get pregnant and you're infertile? Is it the fact that you have to rest all weekend just to get ready for next week? Are you in chronic pain? Are you anxious all day? Like, what is that pain point? And then a lot of times people have already been to the conventional medicine ringer, whereas they just throw me on a birth control pill, an SSRI. They just told me I'm aging, and I just don't accept that. And that's why they tend to call me in. But I try to get real with patients, figure out what their goals are, and just let them know we have to have a different, action to create the different result. And we can't keep this loop going.
Mhm. Or one thing I see very
Mhm.
commonly here in Canada is people are getting ADHD diagnosis just left, right, and center without,
Yeah.
that's usually not the case. It's they're just not being listened to.
Yeah. And like, I hate these diagnoses because what's the purpose of that diagnosis, right? What's the purpose of it? The purpose of the diagnosis is to get an ICD-10 code so a medication can be prescribed and so a doctor can get reimbursement. But what does that do? Like, are you suffering from a Ritalin Adderall deficiency? You're not. And so diagnoses are helpful if it helps you get to the root cause. And so I'm not anti-medicine, I'm pro root cause. Sometimes medicine makes sense for a very short period of time while you get to the root cause. Most of these medicines were never meant to be forever, right? If you look at someone who was prescribed Prilosec or omeprazole, it was never meant to be prescribed for decades. There's no research on that. And the research that's come out in the last year puts a lot of stress on the kidneys, can create kidney problems. And so I'm not anti-medication, I'm just pro root cause. And so your question, I want to make sure I hit your question. ADHD. So let's get to the root cause. So first off, do you truly have ADHD? Right? Do you have that issue? Is there anything you can do where you can focus for periods of time? Can you read a book? Can you most like most people can do things that they love and they enjoy and they can focus on it. And number two, most people are just frying out their dopamine because they're on technology too much and they just go from one thing to the next to the next to the next, whether it's video games or tablets. And so if we're dealing with kids and adults, it's different, right? But the third thing is if you've depleted your adrenals and you depleted your dopamine and you depleted your serotonin, neurotransmitters are very important to look at your brain and to look at your ability to focus. Also, if your brain's inflamed, it's going to be easy for your brain to be foggy because you are activating the microglial cells, your brain's inflamed, so you're not going to be able to process as well either. So we look at the brain neurotransmitters, which are connected to the adrenals, and also things like GABA, which relaxes the brain, is connected to low progesterone, and chronic stress, especially in women, depletes progesterone. It pulls progesterone down to cortisol. It pulls dopamine down to adrenaline. And so then your whole hormonal milieu has been depleted, and it will be harder to relax. It'll be harder to chill out. It'll be harder to to feel joy because those neurochemicals are just lower.
Hmm. And just two things there. I'm glad you mentioned progesterone because it is our
Yeah.
calming hormone, and
Yes.
especially as women age, like something that needs to get a lot of attention. But
Yeah.
a lot of these ADHD medications, Vyvanse being one of the more prominent ones here in Canada, they also deplete minerals as well,
Yeah.
which they're like highly implicated in mineral
Mm.
deficiencies. And you said as
Yeah.
well, what did these diagnoses do? Like, what do you do when you give person a diagnosis? Well, a lot of the time, you paralyze someone because they think, well, then I have this now. There's nothing I can do about it. And then they just go off about their merry way. They don't change anything and they just accept their medication. So getting a diagnosis can be very paralyzing for a lot of people. Not everyone, but a lot of people.
100%. And things like Vyvanse, that works on dopamine, right? That's a dextroamphetamine. So that works on dopamine and norepinephrine, right? So it's going to be similar to like an Adderall, right? One of those situations. But yeah, anytime you throw a diagnosis, this is why I hate diagnoses, right? Like if someone said like, "Oh, like you have a, staph infection right on your skin, and let's give you like a topical neosporin, a cyclosporin to topically apply that." I'm okay with that diagnosis because underlying issue is that's there, infection, topical thing. It's not blowing up your gut. It's at least isolated to the issue and it fixes the underlying problem. Now, again, why did you get it? Like, are you rolling around on a jujitsu mat and you're not cleaning it? Like, we're still ignoring that root cause, but we can at least topically treat it. A week later, it's gone, right? I like diagnoses that fit the underlying root cause, right? Now, again, problem is antibiotics are mostly used systemically. That wipes out the gut. So that's a whole other problem. I won't go there. But most of these diagnoses do not fix the underlying issue. And diagnoses in general tend to victimize people, and they tend to make them feel like they have no control. And this thing is the solution. And because this is a solution, I take no accountability for my diet, my lifestyle, my nutrient levels, my sleep, anything. And so it takes people away from accountability. And good health is all about accountability.
And unfortunately, some people don't want to hear that.
They
They
don't.
don't
They
want,
don't.
it's just, I suppose it's part of being human.
Well, when you're chronically ill, it's easy to be like, well, I have this diagnosis, and that's why I, can check out of family events and not have to do this and not have to go to work and can stay home. And it's there's a lot of stress when you have to be accountable, right? There's a lot more responsibility on you where that diagnosis may let you check out of responsibility and it can feel good for a while, but you're not gonna it never feels great when you're not at your optimal health.
Well, in the
And if
end,
you know you can do something about it too, it's like, it's always tricky.
it's gonna, if you check out, in the end, it's gonna come back and bite you in the ass.
It
Eventually
is.
it will. There's no
Yeah.
easy way out.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, especially, living a good life is all about reaching your potential, right? Taking the gifts that God's given you and doing the best with them, right? If you get a garden, I'm going to till it. I'm going to fertilize it. I'm going to plant great seeds. I'm going to water it. I'm going to take that land that I was given. I'm going to take it and make the best thing out of it. And when you don't till it and you don't do the things and you get no produce, that's like someone not taking accountability for their health. And that stinks.
So before we move on to like our next few topics, you already mentioned electrolytes. What other
Mhm.
nutrients would you recommend for addressing adrenal fatigue in the aspect of low adrenal function, where someone just feels like they've nothing left in the tank, they've no energy, they've got malaise, blah, blah, blah.
So I always look at this between male and female. It's important because if a woman has, let's say, a lot of cycle issues, like hormonal issues, lots of PMS, maybe they don't have a cycle, right? Looking at where the cycle is can tell me how severe and how long it's been going on. Maybe they're amenorrhea, maybe they're not even having a period, right? All those things will tell me how severe it is, and then how drastic we have to be with what we recommend. And so that tells me a lot. So we definitely like to do testing because I want to see how good or bad the adrenals are at. I want to see how good or bad the hormones are at. The hormones are really depleted. We may want to do and add in some bioidentical nutrition as well. B vitamins are key because B vitamins are like the core cofactors for your brain working. Like B6 is like the co is the major cofactor that's the rate limiting nutrient for all your serotonin and dopamine to work. So we want to make sure those B vitamins are good. And then, of course, the gut, because you can have great food, great nutrition, but if we're not breaking down, absorbing, and assimilating, or we're under a lot of stress where the nutrients that are coming in aren't enough, we still need to use more. That's where supplements play a really important role. And so it's good to really look deeper at the hormones, take a look at the hormones at the luteal phase level, take a look at some of the nutrient issues, make sure the gut's dialed in. And then depending on stress, what do we have control over in regards to our stress? Can we decrease the stress in our life? If we can't, then we have to make more drastic lifestyle changes on the other side to make sure we heal and recover from that.
What tests do you like? My mentor is Dr. Michael Platt, or one of them. I'm sure
Mm,
you're aware of him.
mhm,
And he always taught me that AM cortisol was a great test for testing adrenaline first thing in the morning, and he's looking for that to be under 10. Ideally 8 to have optimal function. But I do look at Dutch tests as well.
mhm.
Saliva, not so much, but what are your favorite tests for the
I like,
adrenals?
yeah, I mean, I like the Dutch testing is great. The cortisol serum when we look at total. And so sometimes you see free issues that are problematic and you wouldn't see it in the blood, but it's fine to still look at it. I do like blood testing. I like a good CBC, metabolic panel. I do like a cortisol and or free or total testosterone and a progesterone right in around day 20. I like the Dutch testing because I like to look at hormonal detoxification and free and total cortisol. So I do like that. I like to get a window into methylation and organic acid. That tells me a lot about detoxification. Methylation is needed for all of your body's chemistry to work. Methylation is essentially your body using a carbon and three hydrogens in different metabolic pathways to kind of help as the catalyst. And so if we don't have that in, or if we have an MTHFR deficiency, we're not getting, high quality activated folate, that could be a problem too. And so that's why good supplements are helpful. But good supplements sit on the foundation of a really good diet. And a good diet sits on the really good foundation that we can absorb and digest and assimilate it. And we're not eating a bunch of food allergens that are inflaming the gut too. So I try to be very systematic and linear in how we treat patients because the order matters. Some patients, the hardest ones come in and they've done a lot of different things, but it's never been done in the right order. I'm like, if I gave you 5 random numbers that were the numbers of my safe combination, but you didn't do it in the right order, the safe doesn't open. And the sicker someone is, more important the foundation becomes.
Mhm. And it
So if
is
we don't
what,
start with the right foundation and we do this thing first over that, that may be enough to, put you in a place where you lose confidence, you feel worse. It's not that you couldn't push through it. It's just that's going to make you feel so bad that you are going to lose confidence and you're not going to do the right thing.
oh yeah, and you're going to be one of these people that says, I've tried everything, but you haven't really.
You really haven't, or if you've done it, you've done you've went to the safe and you just tried number 25 today, and the next number you tried was 32. But it's the number order matters and how you do it matters. And a lot of people we're in this very like kind of antibiotic, like kill, kill, kill kind of time. And people come in and they want to do a lot of killing or a lot of detox out of the gate. And sometimes that can be really bad for people. That can really set them back a
Mm.
lot, especially if they don't have good digestion or other foundational things aren't dialed in. I tell patients like if you wanted to build this beautiful mansion, like you could sit there and talk about your second floor master bedroom movie theater, but it's like when you're building a mansion or a house of any kind, the first thing is you grade the land, you smooth it out, you dig a hole, you pour some concrete, that's a foundation, and then the framing of the house goes up from there. But if you're worried about this up here, but you haven't got the land level and you haven't got the concrete hole dug and poured, nothing else matters. And so I tell patients that in the beginning it's very much non-sexy, but the stuff you're going to see on TikTok and Instagram, it's going to not be about the non-sexy stuff. It's going to be about the stuff that's more sexy and nuanced.
Clickbait, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens all the
And
time.
well, is interesting if someone like is already stressed up to their eyeballs and they decide to do a parasite cleanse or a heavy
Mhm.
metal detox, you're
Mhm.
just throwing fuel on the
Yeah.
fire at that state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is if you're sleeping 6, 7 hours a night, how can we get you at 8 hours? Let's look at your diet. Let's look at your digestion. Let's look at some of your foundational nutrients. Let's just keep it really simple. Let's start making some habit changes. How much control do you have over the stress in your life? And then it's getting a buy-in, getting a buy-in or getting, if we're dealing with a married couple, you got to be on board together, right? You got to be a team. And so you got to have a support system there. If it's just you pulling the load or your spouse doesn't support you what you're doing, it can become a little bit harder. And so
Mhm.
you really want everyone to buy into it.
Well, it is what we said at the beginning. It is all the things. It's not just one thing. So often
Hmm.
people will ask me, well, what supplement do you recommend for this? Or do you recommend progesterone for this? Or like they just want them again, as cliche as
Yeah.
it is, the magic
Hmm.
pill. And I'm like, well, if
Yeah.
you don't have at least your sleep and nutrition on par,
Yeah.
that supplement is only going to get you so
Yeah.
far. And even then, it might just be a waste of money.
Yeah. And my kind of method of dealing with things, we do the 6 R's. So the first R is removing the bad foods. So we're dialing in the foods. We're making foundational lifestyle changes, diet changes, exercise changes. We're making sure hydration and electrolytes are dialed in. The second R, we're making sure we're digesting the foods that we're eating. Just because you're eating those foods does not mean, are you chewing it up enough? Are you taking enough enzymes and acids? Are you avoiding significant hydration with your food, which could be diluting your enzymes and raising your pH and lowering making your acid levels lower. Like that could be an impact. The third R is your gut inflamed, right? Remember, 80% of your immune cells are in the gut. So we look at gut lining integrity and or supporting the hormones because hormones help deal with stress, especially the adrenals. And then while we're doing that, where's our blood sugar at? Are we bouncing our blood sugar around? A lot of women get caught up in this intermittent fasting thing. And it's like intermittent fasting is meant for women who are healthy and have good hormone health, good cycle, good fertility. They're dialed in. Then you can add that stress. It's like someone who's very fit adding in CrossFit. You wouldn't take someone who's sedentary and obese and say, go do CrossFit. It's too much stress. So the key to stress is giving your body like 2 to 5% more than what it can handle, right? So it's just enough of a hormetic stressor where you get a little bit, that bicep, you break it down, gets a little sore, but you're a little bit stronger in 2 days.
Yeah.
But if you went more than that, you put the body beyond what it can handle, and now you're incapacitated. You can't use your arm, right? It's like that with everything else. So we have to be very specific and methodical and specific in how we add that stress into your body. We want to look at each person and individualize what they can do and make recommendations based on just pushing them just a little bit, but not too much.
Mhm. Before we jump into thyroid, I just want to circle back to the PCOS for 1 second, if you don't mind. I heard you
Yeah.
mention before in another video that you're seeing more PCOS issues in
Hmm.
younger women nowadays. Why do you
Yes.
think it's happening in younger women? Like, what's driving up that?
Well, I think just most processed foods that we see marketed, they're just processed crap, garbage. It's just processed carbohydrates, flours, grains, sugars, high fructose corn syrup. I mean, you can just go look at simple data look at sugar consumption from 1906. I have it in my book, 4 pounds per year to now it's over 130, 140 pounds a year. So you just start really simple. And again, I get it, right? Doesn't talk about every person, but this just looks at the general trend. Okay. And so there's that right there. Okay. There's that aspect of just way more sugar. And then anyone who's worried about, I want to go vegan, I want to go vegetarian, I'm going to save the environment. Well, number one, you're not going to have an impact on the environment when you're eating grass-fed organic, you know, meat and animals. That's going to be much, much more healthier. It's the methane, CAFO, factory farm stuff. So don't worry. If you want to save the environment, work on organic, less pesticides, less plastics, and then work on, grass-fed. You don't have all the methane from all the cows eating grains and unnatural diet. So focus on that. Don't devoid yourself of all these important nutrients. Just eat better quality out of the gates. And then so people that go vegan, vegetarian, they're avoiding the high quality fat soluble vitamins. They're avoiding the high quality proteins. If you're avoiding the good quality fats and proteins, what fills that void? It has to be more carbohydrate or it's more processed seed oils, right? So something has to fill that void. Soy, canola, right? So that's why you want to, if you get the good proteins and fats, and then you focus on better quality carbs according to kind of your activity level, right? Vegetables over fruit and starch, or fruit and starch if you're more active, if you're getting some movement and your weight's good, then you can always adjust up on the carbs. I'm not like high carb or low carb. I think most people need to start off default lower carb and then work up from there. Just
Mhm.
because of the fact that people have damaged metabolisms. When if you're one of these people that are consuming 150 pounds of sugar a year compared to 4 pounds 100 years ago, that's a problem. Our body cannot deal with that. I mean, if you test your blood sugar and you get a reading, let's say under 100 mg per dl, that's your typical blood sugar. Let's say it's at 95, right? And you have 6 liters of blood, and you go do the math, and you control the the milligrams per deciliter, and you convert it to how many actual teaspoons of sugar are in your blood. I'm gonna ask you right now, how many teaspoons of sugar are in your blood, you think, for a healthy reading
Now or per day?
right now?
Right now, I would guess 6 in for me because I haven't had any sugar yet today. I've only had meat so far and collagen, so maybe 6.
Yeah, so if you had 6 teaspoons of sugar or glucose in your blood right now, your blood sugar reading would be about 600. You'd be extremely severely diabetic. So the average person in 6 liters, a gallon and a half of blood, has for a healthy reading like around 90, has just under 1 teaspoon for the
Jeez.
whole body. So if you put in a 20-ounce soda, which has about 10 teaspoons, your body's freaking out to get rid of that sugar.
Mhm.
All right, again, I use the word sugar loosely, but you got typically sucrose, which is table sugar, and then you have half is fructose and glucose. And then you have high fructose, which is 55 fructose, 45 sucrose. And then you have things like that are more glucosey, which is like more your starchy vegetables. And then you have like lactose, which is in milk, right? So that's kind of your general sugars that are coming in, right? Um, and so if you do that, your body's got to one, store it in the liver and store it in the muscle. If you're weak and you don't work out, you're not active, then your muscles are already full of glycogen, that's stored glucose. Fructose preferentially prefers the liver over the muscle. What's the problem with that is your liver has six times less storage capacity as your muscles. Why? Because your muscles are everywhere and they're big. Your liver is just in this upper right hand quadrant here. And so then you start to get non-alcoholic fatty liver, and then you become systemically insulin resistant. So does that help kind of why and what's happening physiologically? The first thing is just understand how limited your body is to carry sugar slash glucose in your blood at any one time. And then your muscles prefer glucose, your liver prefers fructose, and you can't handle that much in your liver. Maybe 60 to 90 grams, not a lot.
And then there's inflammation, plus a lot
Hmm.
of young girls experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety nowadays. Well, I don't know, we could probably go into the conversation where social media in itself causes young girls to have a lot of anxiety comparing themselves to other girls and
Oh, it's a big
unrealistic
one.
expectations. And that then will influence that blood sugar response because it is a stressor of a sort.
Oh, 100%. They say the grass is always greener. It's like, well, maybe your neighbor's grass is AstroTurf, right? Maybe it's just fake. So and then everyone uses filters and this and that, and
Oh yeah.
everyone's life's a highlight reel. So I mean, I tell like my kids, I have 2 boys that are 5 and 7. They're going to have no access to social media while they're in my house. Once they're adults, 18 or up, or maybe 17 or 18, we'll start to work with them on it in a very specific environment. But social media is devastating for kids. If you look at, there's articles on this of the tech founders that created social media and these devices, they don't even let their kids use it. Okay,
Oh
that tells you something.
yeah.
All right, you should have a fully functional frontal cortex to be using these things. That's my personal opinion. Women develop much faster than men, 18 to 20 for a female, 25 to 30 for a male, right? And so I think you shouldn't really be using these devices until you are a fully formed frontal cortex, at least social media wise. I mean, there's some great apps out there that my kids use a couple of really good learning apps that I love that work so good. But you got to mitigate that as much as possible. So stay off of social media. Number one, I think that's really important and really work on, the foundations of eating and diet and lifestyle. I see so many parents, they project kind of what they would want as kids to their kids, and they feed their kids absolute crap. I mean, it's like after my kids' sports games, everyone's coming over with sugar and crappy drinks, and it's like, oh my gosh, like can't we just give these kids maybe like an apple and maybe just like an electrolyte water? Like, can we just keep it simple? They don't need like 30 grams of sugar in a Gatorade. Like that's
Mhm.
just junk.
Yeah.
And so, so there's so much stuff, people are just propagandized to that they think everyone needs, all the sugar and stuff and all the technology, all the social media. So I think that's really important. Get focused on what matters to you, your core values, get focused on good healthy habits. don't make your highlight reel on social media. I think that's just it's people really look so much externally for validation. I think really look through validation through yourself.
It's
Yeah, I think it's so much more
sad.
important.
It
Hmm.
is really sad. And we all know better. We do, but
Hmm.
we get sucked into that
Hmm.
pit of death and darkness. Like
Yeah.
I do too. I don't do the whole highlight things, and I have the awareness that I shouldn't compare myself. But it for other people, and I have strict boundaries. I try to just keep social media to work. But
Yeah.
for other people, it is sad. It's so unrealistic. And to need that validation from how many likes you get or how many subscribers or followers you have. And yeah, I feel sorry for people in that aspect.
It's tough. I mean, there was a quote by Wayne Dyer is something like, your opinion, what people think about you, right? Your opinion, people's opinion of you exists outside of you. You can have 100 people looking at you that'll have 100 different opinions. Now, that being said, you want to have an internal compass and a morality where you hold yourself to a high standard where you don't become a narcissist or a sociopath or a gaslighter. So you still want to have something where you look within, you have some kind of moral value, whether it's religion, connection to God, where you follow the golden rule. You do unto others as others would do unto you. You love your neighbor as you love yourself. I think that's important, but you just don't want that validation to come from outside of you because then your control exists here versus here.
Yeah. So your new book is on thyroid. Let's just
Mhm.
transition for a few minutes into
Yeah.
that. Tell
Oh,
us
and
about.
one last thing. You were talking about the females, right?
Mhm.
Also, birth control pills, especially hormonal birth controls, I think can be a really negative consequence. If someone's on like a synthetic estrogen birth control pill for 10 years, I think that really can be devastating to your hormones. I think it really can be. I mean, my general recommendations, what do you recommend? Well, I recommend women should be on top of their health and their nutrition. I think it's good. It is that if you're willing to have that much of a focus, try to track your cycle, right? It's only 2 to 3 days a month you can get pregnant. There's so many good apps out there where you can plug in your cycle, plug in everything, and then you kind of know this is my 2, 3 day window. And then if you want an additional insurance policy, you can do like a Paragard copper IUD. It's not great, but at least it's not hormonal. And then outside of that, just general barrier methods. But I think try to be more on top of your health where and that may not work for everyone, and not everyone's super responsible. I get it, right? And some parents, have kids that may be in different situations and they don't trust their kids. I get that, but that's optimal, right? I'm just trying to give you the optimal situation. And if people can adhere to that, I think it's better.
There's a lot we can do. As a woman, you should know your
Totally.
body. You can take your temperature, you can look for cervical mucus. Like you should be in tune with your body.
Should be. And there's so many good apps where you can just track your cycle, track your bleeding. It'll give you a pretty good indication. If you're sexually active, you can always just get some OPK strips and, once day 9, 10, 11, you can kind of pee on the, and then that'll tell you if you're ovulating. And then you kind of know after a couple of cycles, you're going to know I'm right here. I'm right here. This is
Mhm.
my window. And then maybe you switch and you use a barrier method during that time frame. So I try to, just be really aware. I get it doesn't work for everyone, but I'm just trying to just give general information that can reach the most amount of people. But the more mature you are, I recommend avoiding that.
Yeah. So we've just got a few minutes left,
Yeah.
Dr. J, and I'm hoping we can just cover thyroid a little bit because it is your new book. But you've been talking about thyroid for
Yeah.
years. If people go to your YouTube channel is a gold mine. Like
Thank
everybody,
you.
it
Thank you.
is
That's so nice.
literally like because you have everything highlighted so
Yeah.
specifically and it's all categorized and so helpful. But if people scroll back, this is nothing new to you. You have been talking about thyroid for decades
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
Yeah. You got it. The OG. You got it.
So, what are like this is a simple question. What are the biggest problems you see around thyroid now and in women specifically?
Well, great question. So first off, most thyroids are autoimmune. Most thyroid issues are autoimmune in nature. So what is low thyroid, right? So first off, conventionally, is you start to see that elevated TSH. That's your brain pituitary hormone starts to get elevated. It's having to increase the volume to talk to the thyroid to make T4 and then T3, which is 3 to 4 times more metabolically active. And so stress can create that. Lower thyroid hormone downstream can create that. And then, of course, most commonly, there's autoimmunity. Your immune system is beating up the thyroid, it's attacking it. And then, therefore, it's getting damaged. You're having scar tissue infiltration, less functional production. Hormone levels drop, TSH goes up because it's inverse. It's increasing the volume to get better listening and production down here. If this drops over here on the T4, T3 side, this goes up on the TSH side. And so most of it, it's nutrition plays a role, stress plays a role, insulin plays a role, but autoimmune plays a big role. And guess what? Sorry, ladies, but 5 times more likely for a woman to be impacted than a man. Now, why is that? It has to do with hormones. You have a CD8, CD4 ratio, natural killer cell to helper cells. And when hormones start to go off and estrogen dominance starts to go off, this ratio starts to drop a little bit, and that makes you more prone to autoimmune issues. It is what it is. This is why I see 80% of my patients are female, partly because there's just not a lot of good options when these issues happen. And women are more intuitive and they don't take no for an answer and they keep on looking and searching. And then functional medicine eventually comes on their radar. And that's where we come up, where we're providing content and actual answers. And I'm not just telling you like, I'm trying to give you the mechanisms and you can look at it. You can go punch this stuff into Google or to ChatGPT and you can find lots of data on this stuff. And so the autoimmune component, the insulin, the cortisol, the nutrient deficiencies, all these play massive roles.
Mhm. Dr. Alan Christensen, who I'm sure you're
Hmm.
aware of, he,
Yep.
of course, has been practicing thyroid for a long time as well. Some of
Hmm.
his stuff I agree with, some not so much, but he does
Like
say,
what? Like what? I'm just curious.
well, the iodine topics that are going around, he's talking about iodine a lot lately. He's
Hmm.
also discussed testing and that testing is pointless apart from maybe TPO or an ultrasound. But one thing he does
Mm.
say is that most cases of hypothyroidism are due to some sort of autoimmune, specifically
Hmm.
Hashimoto's. So that's one thing I would tend to agree with him on, especially when we consider a lot of the gut issues people are having or women are having.
So he's saying that he doesn't recommend thyroid for hormone testing
Yeah,
for
he thinks
dosing.
that hormone tests are useless, basically, when we're looking at the
Interesting.
thyroid, except for the antibodies and potentially an ultrasound.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's got to be an evolved position from him.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's got to be a newer position. I don't agree either. I think when you're supporting someone hormonally, you want to make sure you don't overdo it. I mean, I guess you would know with sleeplessness, insomnia, irritability, but I mean, I want to avoid that with patients, so it's better to test. So yeah, probably disagreement on that. I agree.
mm. But what do you think? What do you say if a woman does come back with low TSH? Because really, especially in Canada, it's the only thing that's being tested unless you request more. With a low TSH, but she's still freezing, she's no energy, she's constipation, her hair is falling out, but the TSH is in range or low.
Yeah, so that's why I tell all my patients is that you have the right to have more than one issue going on at the same time. And I would just say, why are we myopically just looking at the thyroid? So I would have ATF or ATM, right? We're looking at the adrenals together, the thyroid together, the female or the male hormones together. And we'll still look at male with female because of PCOS is a male hormone, but it can still impact the female. So we're looking at ATM, ATF together. We're looking at them side by side. And sometimes what you see is the thyroid isn't that bad, but then the adrenals are much worse, relatively speaking. Now, let's just say hypothetically, let's say the thyroid hormones are good. Now, what does good mean? Because 2.2, 2.3 for a free T3, I think it's a PG per ml, is still quote unquote good, but you're in the bottom 5% of the reference range. So I want functionally good. I want, middle to maybe upper 25% of the hormonal range for T3 free. I at least want the TSH above zero point 0.5. I don't want it to fall asleep, right? And if it is falling asleep, why is that? So that's where we're going to go look at cortisol and inflammation and autoimmunity. And also, where's the reverse T3 at? Do we have a lot of high reverse T3 maybe where it's clogging up the receptor sites and impacting the thyroid hormone from binding? Or are we just looking at T4 and not looking at T3? And do we have a malconversion from T4? So there's a lot of assumptions we'd have to kind of clear up. And then do we have high levels of insulin? Is cortisol overly high, overly low that's impacting that conversion? So all these things I'd want to cross off my list. And then how low is DHEA? How low is cortisol? All these things play a big role.
Mhm. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to.
Do you want to give me more specifics on that situation?
Well, no, yeah, I think you answered it pretty well. Like I was
Yeah.
saying, there's a lot of moving parts. We're not just
So
looking
in
at the
in
TSH.
that situation, like, do you have like a how high would the T3 be there?
Well, T3 would be still middle of the range. So TSH,
Hmm.
actually, I'm thinking of below 1.5
Hmm.
and TSH middle of the range and the same with T4, but still experiencing all of the symptoms.
Yeah. So that's where you have to look at everything else together. And there's probably a more of a cortisol issue. I'd want to know where T4 was too. Is there a malconversion too?
Yeah.
And also I want to know where they've come from. You know, like are they being treated for the last 3 to 6 months? Where were they then? And if someone's really, serious like that, where those symptoms aren't moving, I want to check out their basal temperature monthly to see if it's moving in the right direction. Because if you're low but you're less low, that's also a sign that we're moving. But I want to look at it with everything together. I think it's very easy to someone to get thyroid in their brain, and they just only want to get their thyroid looked at. And you just have to be open. Like I market to patients talking about thyroid, but I never say only look at the thyroid in isolation. It's thyroid can be connected to everything else. And so we may talk about thyroid, but that means your thyroid can be impacted by low cortisol, by insulin resistance, by low vitamin A, by, gluten sensitivity. So it can be connected to everything. So just don't get, if you're listening, don't get overly focused on the thyroid and treat it just locally. Look at everything holistically.
Yeah, so many moving parts, including sleep and inflammation is one thing that if something I do get my clients to do a lot is take their basal temperature every morning. And if there's one thing that's going to destroy that, it's going to be poor sleep.
Yes, yes, I agree. And people out there on the functional medicine side, like, you kind of talked about Christensen. I'm not saying he's doing this, but I see this a lot, is people just try to be overly controversial. They,
Hmm.
they try to say things just to get attention, and they'll say things that are very provocative, and it may or may not be true. They just may be doing it to pull eyeballs.
Yeah.
And so, just be mindful. If you're the average patient and you're looking, it's easy to get pulled into provocative things. That's all.
If you have a minute, I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
How important, well, I suppose this is two. How important
Yeah.
is protein and movement for thyroid health?
Oh, I mean, it's everything, right? So, what does movement mean? So, shoot for 10,000 steps a day just to get some generalized. Why is movement important? When you're putting glucose in your body via carbohydrates, you're going to get some. By moving, you're burning it up before your body has to deal with it and store it and convert it to fat or convert it. So you're burning it up. So it takes stress off your pancreas and your beta cells. It's going to stimulate your mitochondria. There's a lot of good benefits. It's just good for your joint, good for blood flow, good for inflammation. So just generalized movement, 10,000 steps a day is important. And then your next question was what
Was
again?
protein.
Oh, and protein's essential because your body is like most women as they get older, what's one of their biggest concerns? The biggest concern is osteoporosis. And what's the biggest thing that people think about osteoporosis? What's the biggest thing they think about when they hear that?
It's usually hormonal
Well,
fluctuations.
but usually I think people think, oh, calcium, right.
Mhm.
But I say, no, no, your bones are half protein. So first off, protein is essential. How much do you need? I tell my female patients, you should be shooting for at a minimum a half a gram per pound of body weight. Ideally, probably zero point 0.7 grams per 1 pound of body weight. And if you're very active, shoot for 1 gram per 1 pound of body weight. That's important. And ideally choose, full fat sources, grass-fed meat, pasture-fed eggs. That's essential. And again, most of your hormones from here up are peptide based hormones. That means they're protein based. Your thyroid is protein based. 4 molecules of iodine, and then your molecule of tyrosine. Your pituitary and hypothalamus hormones are mostly peptide. Your insulin and growth hormone are peptide. And then everything down below that are going to be cholesterol based. Cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, mineral corticoids. They're all cholesterol. So eat the raw material you need to make what you need. Make sure you're on top of movement just as a good means of BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor, cleaning up glucose, and it's very good because you need force to go through your muscles and bones to remodel, to stimulate anabolic growth and healing. So
Mhm.
I hope that helps.
And yeah, and protein is also pro-thyroid in a sense. It's pro-metabolic.
Hmm.
It helps with
The raw
thermal.
material, the tyrosine, yep, exactly. And then like the iodine thing, I talked about this in my book, um, and I tied a whole chapter on this. And I've seen patients go really high, and there's a lot of data on too much iodine can be a problem. But there's some data, that being none is also not good either. And so I tell patients anywhere between, the RDA of like 150 micrograms up to 1 milligram. But if you have antibodies, always work on getting the antibodies more stable, more dialed in. Make sure selenium, zinc, magnesium, make sure all the important cofactors, selenium, zinc, magnesium, make sure you're digesting your protein, make sure everything's dialed in. And then if you're going to increase iodine, be very careful with it and go slow and go methodical and check your antibodies in between as you're dosing up.
I think what we come to at the end of this conversation, Dr. Justin, in summary, it is all the things. It's
Hmm.
everything. It's not just one thing. You have to address everything for the adrenals, for the PCOS,
Correct.
for the thyroid. Your new book is out in what, just 2 weeks or so? It would
Yeah, a
be.
couple of weeks, thyroidreboot.com. And that'll bring you to the Amazon page. It's a black title, black cover on there. So if you see it, that'll stick out.
Mhm.
And then outside of that, I see patients worldwide. My website's justinhealth.com. I see patients worldwide where we dive in, we do lab testing, we get to the root cause, we recommend programs. Just like we're talking here, patients get the chance to talk to me one on one. So if that interests them, feel free that you can reach out, justinhealth.com. And also I have a podcast and YouTube channel. I do live videos and all kinds of stuff. So if someone wants to just kind of engage with me there, that's great too.
Yeah, I love your YouTube channel, and your podcast is Beyond Wellness, and you do a lot
Yep.
of episodes with Evan Brand as well.
Yep. Yep. We
You
chat
have
a
an
lot. Yeah.
Instagram page, which I'll connect
Yep.
to. And you, just for everyone's attention, you do offer free consultations.
Yeah. Intro
So
consults. Yeah.
yeah, I was actually speaking to a woman on YouTube like 2 weeks ago, and she said, I'm in Texas and there's nobody around that can help
Mm.
me. Like, there's no doctors.
Mm.
And I said, well, actually, you need to go check out Dr. Justin. So
That's
hopefully she
great.
reaches out to you because I mean, I'm sure you're not the only one in Texas, but
Hmm.
the fact
Oh, yeah.
that she said there was no one to help her in Texas kind of showed how helpless she felt.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Well, if you go to justinhealth.com, there'll be links for like the Instagram, the YouTube, the podcast. We have all the YouTube, the big videos and podcasts all transcribed too. So if you don't like to listen, you can also read it there too.
well, thank you for your time today, Dr. Justin. I'll put everything in the comments. I look forward to your book. I've already checked Amazon Canada and it says release date June 3rd. So I'll be
Awesome.
keeping an eye out for that. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Shemaine. Really appreciate it. Nice chatting with you and love to chat with you again, maybe on my podcast. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, Dr. Justin.
Nice chatting with you. You take care.